Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a deeper understanding and an appreciation of the wonderful and captivating world of chess. I am your host, George Marajanian, Program Director for the Wachusett Chess Club, which meets every Wednesday evening from 7 to 11 in room C-199 of the McKay Campus School at Fitchburg State College. And with me, once again, is my trusty and confidant, my trusty co-host, Martin Lane of Lunenburg, one of the strongest and most active chess players in North Central Massachusetts. Welcome back. Welcome
Hello,
to
George.
Chess Chat.
Welcome to be happy to be back.
Okay. Marty, you know, we had actually a major national rated tournament, chess tournament, a little more than a week ago, and it was held in Leominster. It was held at the Boys and Girls Club of North Central Massachusetts on West Street, and this tournament honored the memory of Harry Nelson Pillsbury.
Right.
Now, you know who Harry Nelson Pillsbury is.
Pillsbury was a very prominent player of the late 19th and early 20th century, native of Massachusetts. And that tournament, we had a great turnout for a one-day tournament.
Actually, we have a great photo of Pillsbury on the screen.
Right.
And actually, he was born in Somerville. He was a Massachusetts native, as you say, born in Somerville, went to school there, went to grammar school, entered Somerville High School, and in his sophomore year, he actually suffered a major loss. His mother died when he was 16 years old, and he became very despondent, very distraught. And it was family members who persuaded Pillsbury to take up chess. They said, you know, you need something to ease your loss. You know, he took his mother's passing very dearly, so he took up chess. He learned he went to, maybe picked up some books, went to the library.
So it was therapeutic then, in a way.
It was therapy for Pillsbury. Had his mother not died, you know, when he was 16, he may not have actually been involved in chess at all. But yes, chess was something that he studied and actually became very good at. In fact, he developed into actually the strongest player in the Boston area. You know, he frequented the chess clubs in Boston, the Boston Chess Club, and there was the Deschapelles Chess Club. There were a number of chess clubs in Boston at that time.
Now, he developed fairly quickly. Wasn't it within just a couple of years of when he first started to play that he was already playing the top players?
He was. And his claim to fame, Marty, is that actually, you know, he actually, after he left Massachusetts, again, his formative years were here in Massachusetts, in Somerville and in Boston. He went to New York and actually played there. Of course, you got really strong players in New York, and he became the champion of the Manhattan Chess Club, which was the premier chess club in New York City. And that was in 1894 that he became the champion of that club. And the club said, you know, we've got a talented player here. And the club knew that there was an international tournament being held the following year in Hastings, England. This actually was a tournament organized and by there was no British Chess Federation or Association. It was actually the Hastings Chess Club. And they said, you know, we'd like to actually bring all the strongest players of the world to Hastings, England for this tournament. So Pillsbury received an invitation. But of course, the players who were considered the really heavy favorites was the world champion Emanuel Lasker, the former world champion Wilhelm Steinitz. We had Mikhail Chigorin of Russia. We had Dr. Siegbert Tarrasch of Germany. There were 22 players, top-notch players. This was the cream of the crop.
Now, was Pillsbury the only American in that field?
He was the only American.
So he had really become the top American player.
Yes.
And then now he needed to go to Europe to sort of prove himself against all the other top players in the world.
Right.
Who were all Europeans at the time.
And the Europeans scoffed. They said, an American has no chance, you know, against us. You know, the Europeans said, we dominate chess. The English, the French, the Germans, the Russians. They said, you know, there's no way an American player can come over here and dominate us. Well, he proved them wrong. In this 22-player field, it was a single round robin. The tournament took just about a month. He finished first. He finished ahead of the world champion.
And what was his score?
He scored 16 and a half points out of 21, because he's playing 21 opponents. So that was phenomenal. I mean, you know, and then when he came back, you know, he came back to the United States, and he was treated as a hero everywhere he went. You know, in New York, Boston, they presented him with gold watches, and you know.
And it was a major news story even here in Fitchburg.
In fact, a major story. You know, I have a clipping, not the actual clipping from the Fitchburg Daily Sentinel, but a story I did back in 1995 on the 100th anniversary of this Hastings tournament, which was in 1895.
Right.
And the Fitchburg Daily Sentinel put this in the headline. Now, and this is what they said. This is they put that as a headline: Pillsbury champion, young Boston chess player defeats old masters of Europe. They really.
Do we have a photograph of the field of those players from Hastings?
We do. I don't think we actually. I don't think
we don't have it queued up.
I don't think we have. I don't think we actually have it in the queue.
Oh, okay.
But it's available in books.
Right.
There are books on the Hastings tournament. But it's interesting that the Sentinel, the Fitchburg back then, Fitchburg Daily Sentinel, thought well enough to put this, you know, in the headline of Pillsbury's great success. Now, one thing about Pillsbury, because of the success, he became a professional chess player. You know, people realize that his true calling is chess, and you know what he did? He actually started going around touring not only this country but of the world, in England, France, Germany, Russia, Poland. He put on exhibitions, and he was noted as actually one who would play blindfold. He'd play chess blindfold. He'd also play games of checkers at the same time, blindfold, and a few games of whist. He loved whist.
Now, the question comes up: was he actually physically blindfolded, or was he seated in a different room?
He was just seated in a different room.
So, but he never saw the board.
No,
he wasn't actually physically.
Blindfold chess means that actually the player does not see the position, the board at all.
Right. Now, how does he get the moves? How are the moves transmitted?
It's actually transmitted. Someone is coming actually from one room and coming into the room where Pillsbury and announcing the move.
And they'll say, move 10 on board 4 is...
Yes, that's right. So it's announced to him. That's all he gets, So, and he did this, you know, he was phenomenal. In fact, he had a phenomenal memory. In fact, in this article that I did about a dozen years ago, in London, when he was in London, a group of London professors wanted to stump him. They said, you know, you claim to be a mental, you know, phenomenon. So they gave him a number of words, about a list of 20 words. I'll give you some of the words. These are not common words.
Right.
Anti-phlogiston, peristeum, tachydiatis, plasmon, threlkel, streptococcus.
So these were not common words.
These were not common. So they read off, they gave him a list.
A list of words to memorize.
They said, Mr. Pillsbury, here's a list of 20 words, and these are very esoteric, you know, words. He glanced at them, handed back the list to the professors. He just rattled off the words, and then he rattled off the whole list backwards. I mean, the guy was astounding. I mean, he was...
And he often did this in the middle of tournaments that he was playing in as a serious player. So,
he could do
you know, nowadays players are practically in isolation when they're playing in tournaments. They don't want to be interrupted. They're focused. But he was giving exhibitions even between rounds of tournaments.
Yes, he would do that, yes.
Right.
Okay. He was truly one of the greatest players in the history of the game. And actually, he did exhibitions, again, as I say, around in this country. He did several in Worcester. I'm trying to do some research to see what actually came to the Fitchburg Monastery. It's very possible that he came here and did an exhibition back in the late 1890s, early 1900s.
And for a while, he worked at Coney Island.
Yes, he did.
Giving chess exhibitions as being the inside of what was called the automaton.
Right. So it was this mechanical device, and people were actually bamboozled. They were actually hoodwinked, thought that this was actually a machine that could play chess.
Right.
But it was actually Pillsbury stuffed inside this box,
machine,
playing the people.
Right.
So he was a phenomenon.
Right.
I mean, the likes of him, we'll never see the likes of him ever again. Right. Well, as I said, he did play blindfold chess, and what we're going to present to our viewers today is a game that he played in Paris in June of 1902. It was one of 16. He was playing 16 blindfold games, and he played this against a Frenchman, rather strong chess player, by the name of Charles-Émile Chasserie. And Pillsbury had white in this game, and he opened. Let's start the game here, where Pillsbury made his first move, e4.
Okay. And that,
Yeah.
as we've talked about before, it's a strong move. It occupies a central square. It attacks two other central squares.
Yeah. So yes, it's an excellent move, and it's a very common move, a logical move, as far as, it's always good to put a pawn in the center. Okay, so now, what Chasserie, Monsieur Chasserie did, he responded with e6. That was his move. e6, well, that's rather interesting.
All right, we haven't seen that before. We haven't discussed it.
No, actually, in all the chess chat programs we've done, we've never actually discussed e6. We've discussed e5, moving the pawn, 2 squares forward. Now, does this actually response have a name? Is there a name to this reply?
Well, it would be the first move of what's come to be known as the French defense. I suppose it could go in different directions depending on what black does.
But it is the characteristic.
But it doesn't challenge the center the same way that, say, e5 would, as we've talked about before.
Okay. So what should one do if an opponent, plays just a pawn 1 square forward? What's good, good strategy or good advice for a white to do?
Many commentators say that the player who controls the center controls the game. So if your opponent is going to give you the opportunity to put another pawn in a center square, you take that opportunity and you play d4.
And that's exactly what Pillsbury played
Right.
on his second move. Okay. All right, so it's now black's second move, and black now responded with d5. And again, this is now, we are into a French defense.
Right, this is...
We should actually discuss, Marty, why this is called a French defense. There's got to be a reason why, not because this game was played in France. That's not the reason.
Half of it was.
Well, I mean, this is 1902.
Right.
But actually, the reason why this is called the French defense is that there was a correspondence game, a game played by mail,
right,
between Paris and London in 1834. And back then, the Parisians, they, instead of playing e5 against e4, one of their team members said, you know what? If the Londoners play e4 against us, let's not move our pawn 2 squares forward. Let's move it 1 square forward, play e6. And they did that. And because of the popularity of what happened is the French team won the match. And that name caught on. The name French defense caught on in 1834 because of their victory over London. And that's why we call it the French defense. And that's the name it's known all around the world as the French defense, wherever you go. All right, so now it's Pillsbury's third move coming up.
Right.
Now, what are the options here?
Well,
what does white have?
you look at the board and you say, well, the first thing is that black is attacking this pawn.
Right.
So you need to think about what you're going to do. You could, the other thing you want to look at is that this e6 move blocks in the white squared bishop on c8.
So this is a problem. We call it a
It
problem.
could become,
bishop.
if now this pawn
It is
is
a problem.
blocking that diagonal. So white needs to think about it. He wants to keep that locked in there.
All right.
He also needs to find a way to defend that pawn. If he could exchange, but then that defeats the whole purpose of locking in that bishop because it now opens
Now the
up the
diagonal's
diagonal.
open.
So you don't really want to do that,
Okay.
even though he could. He could go ahead and push right in, and that would restrict black's knight move there.
Okay, that's
Or he can choose to defend that pawn.
This pawn under attack.
He could defend it this way, which is called a Tarrasch defense.
knight d2 defends the pawn.
Or he can play it to c3, which
All right.
accomplishes the same thing. And it defends this pawn in case black
develops
decides
a piece at
to
the
develops
same
a
time.
piece at the same time.
Okay. And that is exactly what Pillsbury played for his third move, knight c3. Okay, so it is now black's turn. Monsieur Chasserie has options here. He could actually, in this position, he could play the bishop here to b4,
right.
pinning the knight, which now is threatening, black is threatening now to take the
Right.
pawn because of this pin. So that's one option, bishop b4, a good move, by the way,
Right.
nothing wrong with that. Right. And the second logical move here is actually developing a different piece and playing knight f6, and that's
Right.
exactly what he played.
Right.
He plays knight f6, putting more pressure on this pawn. But now we have a double attack
Right.
on that e-pawn.
And here again, Pillsbury could push this pawn threaten the knight,
Yes,
force
he
it
could
to
do
go
that.
to a square. He can't go here, he can't go here. Could go here, but that would be difficult.
All right. He could do that.
Instead, he chooses to pin that knight against the queen and develops the bishop.
All right, so we have a second piece developed.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So, so now it is, and I see also the threat with the bishop g5. He actually is threatening to play e5.
Right.
So what black has to do is break that pin. It's very dangerous to leave that pin like that. So what black did here on his fourth move was play bishop e7.
Right.
Played in the game, bishop e7.
Right.
Okay. So it's Pillsbury's turn, his fifth move coming up.
And here
what
again,
are his options?
He could again push that, force the knight off into the square. That would lead to a series of complicated exchanges that would leave a kind of a wide open board.
Right.
What
It's a playable move.
It's certainly playable. What Pillsbury does, though, he chooses to exchange the bishop for the knight.
Okay, so he plays bishop takes f6. All right. So now black has to decide which way to take back, the recapture here. Now, we have two ways. We can actually take with the pawn, g takes f6, but is that good to take with the pawn?
Well, it doubles up pawns here, though that's not too serious in this position. Double pawns are considered a weakness.
Right.
It does really open up the king side, though, for against black. The queen could quickly develop here or to here, and then be ready to castle queen side. Yes. And that could get very difficult for black to defend. He's nowhere near ready to castle on the queen side, and he wouldn't want to castle into an open file like that.
All right, so that would be not advisable to
too many
weaken this king side. All right, so what the black did was play bishop captures f6.
Okay.
All right, now it's Pillsbury's turn.
And Pillsbury chooses to develop his knight to f3.
Now, was that his only choice?
Oh,
here?
no, he could have pushed and forced the bishop back.
But he chose to develop a piece.
Right, he chooses to develop a piece, saving that for some future time.
And that is so important. Piece development is so important in the opening of the game. All right, so now it's black's turn. Well, black, I see, now has the opportunity to castle. And that's exactly what he did. This is the sixth move for black. He castles. Puts his king actually into
which illustrates why it was important not to capture with the G pawn, because he would have been castling into an open file and right into an attack.
Yeah, that would have been very dangerous.
Right. So now his king, as we've said before, a player tries to castle early to get his king to safety.
All right.
And that's just what he does.
Okay.
Pillsbury continues his development, and he plays the bishop to d3, which is very characteristic in the French defense. It often goes there.
And that's
it does, it prepares to castle. It develops a piece. It's also going to be on this critical diagonal.
All right. Okay, so it's black's turn. By the way, besides bishop d3, Pillsbury, played that. Just putting this back, was there any other move which actually was reasonable for white to play here?
Well, again, he always has this push if he wants.
So that was an option.
Right.
See, in chess, the beauty of chess is there's no one correct move. You have actually variety.
Right.
Yeah. So, but he plays actually bishop d3, which is a very logical move, developing a piece, preparing the castle. All right. So now it's black's turn, and he has to. You pointed out that this bishop, this what we call a light squared bishop, because it runs on the white square, the light squared diagonal, is a problem. We got problems with developing this. So what black did was actually play b6. So that was his seventh move, because he's thinking, aha, if I play b6, I now can actually develop this bishop now maybe to b7, putting more pressure on the pawn on e5, or possibly play the bishop to a6 and get rid of the bishop, trade out the bishop.
Right.
So he's thinking, I have to solve this problem bishop.
Right. Because there's nothing he can do much from d7.
That's very passive.
Right.
He'd be in a very passive position. Okay, so it's Pillsbury's move.
And this is a mark of his talent. I mean, he's been holding back on pushing this pawn. A lot of beginners would have pushed the e-pawn very early. And he held off, he developed his pieces, and now he takes the push.
Okay, so now he attacks the bishop on f6, forcing that bishop to move, and the bishop actually, seems it would be safer coming back, which he did. So black actually played bishop e7 on the eighth move, retreats. Okay.
Right. Now, and then Pillsbury, instead of castling, which, you know, he could do, or
Right.
preparing a queenside castle, which he could move the queen and prepare. Now he's ready to do something that's, you know, if you're not familiar with it, can be quite startling. He takes the h-pawn and plays the h-pawn to h4.
Now, this should signal a kingside attack.
Right.
If you're
In
moving-
fact, a classic kingside attack.
So this is characteristic of a kingside attack?
Right. This dates back, according to one source, this dates back to 1619 in a book or a game of an Italian player, Gioacchino Greco, who first illustrated this attack. It came to be, some people called it the Greco attack. Some commentators call it the classical bishop's attack.
Yeah, I've heard
sacrifice.
the term actually, the Greco attack, also known as the Greek gift sacrifice.
Greek gifting.
Because I think actually
Well, what we're talking about, Greco actually means
Greco
Greek.
in Italian, because actually
Latin.
Gioacchino Greco was actually I think he was from Calabrese in Italy.
Right.
And actually, and Greco in Italian, actually Greco is Greek.
Means Greek, right.
Okay, so that's how that term Greek gift came into being.
Right.
So yes, so this has been known for hundreds of years then.
Right.
Goes back a long time. But this is a good way to start a kingside attack. All right, so White's play is going to be on the king side. You see, Black has no play on the king side.
No.
His play is going to be on the queen side. So his response to h4 is now to play c5. He plays c5 on the 9th move.
And that would make sense if it weren't for the fact that Pillsbury has this sacrifice that he can make. And
what's he doing?
He's going to take this bishop, and he's going to play bishop take h7 with check.
Okay. Ooh, he's just
He's
taken a
just
pawn.
taken a pawn for the bishop.
He's just taken a pawn. Well, this is he's sacrificing a piece. Now, you know, Black actually is looking at this and say, this could be unsound. So what Black did, you know, not realizing the consequences of his decision, he accepts the sacrifice and plays king takes h7.
Right.
So he's gone a piece because Pillsbury has deliberately offered this sacrifice. Right. All right. So how does Pillsbury continue the attack? He had to do this for a reason.
And it has to work. When you sacrifice a piece, then you have to make sure that this is going to work, because if it doesn't, you're going to be a piece down.
Exactly.
Okay. So the next step in this is to play knight to g5, check.
Oh, another check. All right. Well, wait a minute. The check, we can eliminate that knight. You know, this bishop and the queen are trained on this knight, and what Black did in the game, instead of retreating, because this would have been a mistake. Actually, on this check, let's say, for example, before we play the move, if he played the king back. To retreat, what would White do here?
Then White takes the queen and plays to h5, threatening mate here.
It's unstoppable.
Right.
Because actually there's no way that the king can run. This knight controls this square. I mean, this queen h7 is threatening mate unstoppably.
Right.
So that tells me that in this position, after
Going back isn't an option.
So he cannot retreat.
No.
Go back to king g8. So what Black did, he played bishop takes g5.
Right.
And that was actually his 11th move.
Now he can recapture with the h-pawn. He can play h takes g5 with check, because it discovers a check from the rook to the king.
All right, so we have a discovered check. All right, so Black says, okay, all right, so now I'll hide. Now that I'm checked again, why can't I hide? And this is what he played in the game. He played king g8. He said, I'm going to go back where I came from.
Right.
But that's a disaster.
The queen comes back, can come out again here to h5, queen to
and what is he threatening here?
He's threatening mate on h8.
Yeah, or actually even there's two.
Unless he moves the rook to
e. Exactly. Now, let's say, for example, well, first of all, let's say, for example, it's Black's move here. What if he tried to create a little escape square for his king, and he played f6? Now,
then all White has to do is to push to g6 and cuts off that escape square.
That's very important, to push the pawn first to control this escape square for the king. Now it's unstoppable mate.
Because it doesn't work if you check first.
No, because now
the king can escape.
Now the king has an escape square.
Right, so you have to push the pawn first.
So g6 is very important to control this f7 square and now threaten mate either on h8 or h7. All right, so in this position, you know what Black did? Black, realizing that there's no escape, he resigned.
Right.
He gave up. And this was actually a 13-move game. As I say, it was one of 16 games that Pillsbury played. And again, you know, Pillsbury, and he came back to this country, again, after the Hastings term in 1895. He came back a hero, but he died at a young age. You know, actually, when he played this exhibition in Paris in 1902, 4 years later, he was dead. He died at the age of 33. Mm-hmm. We actually have, yes, on the screen now, we actually have the grave marker, the stone grave marker, which was put in June 17th. It was a ceremony on June 17, 2006, in Reading, Massachusetts, in Laurel Hill Cemetery. That's the cemetery, if anyone goes to Reading, it's the cemetery which is located right across from the town hall. Mm-hmm. And the Pillsbury grave site is actually located way at the far end of the cemetery. Now, the reason why this was put here, because if anybody were to go actually to Reading, they would find actually that the grave for okay. So what I'm saying is this grave marker was actually put there by the Massachusetts Chess Association, and this was actually done to identify that this was actually Harry Nelson Pillsbury, U.S. chess champion from 1897 to his death in 1906, and he was the hero of Hastings. That's how he was referred to when he won that Hastings tournament. So the Massachusetts Chess Association had a ceremony back on June 17th of 2006. I was there. I was involved with that ceremony. And people ask me, people come up to me, in chess tournaments. They say, Mr. Marjanian, how is it that Mr. Harry Nelson Pillsbury, we have an illustration of him. This was done by a German artist, a nice illustration. You see a cigar in his mouth? Pillsbury loved his cigars. He was an inveterate smoker. He'd been known in games. Back then, you could smoke. They allowed smoking. He'd smoke one cigar after the other. You'd see games, where smoke would just fill the pieces. But going back to this question that people have put to me, why is Harry Nelson Pillsbury buried in Reading, Massachusetts? He never lived in Reading. He never stepped foot in Reading. Well, the reason he actually is buried in Reading is that his mother was born there, grew up there, was the daughter of a very prominent shoe manufacturer. In fact, Reading, back actually after the Civil War, was a premier shoe manufacturing center in this country, Reading. And the daughter, her father was a shoe manufacturer, and the family plot is there in Reading. Now, what is there is the family plot is an obelisk. If you go there, you'll see, besides that grave marker, which we put 2 years ago, or actually last year, there's an obelisk which just says H. Pillsbury. It gives the years, 1872, 1906, but it doesn't identify who this person is.
Now, when you approached the town fathers of Reading with your idea of putting this plaque there, did they even know who Pillsbury was? Did they have any idea?
They were astounded. I spoke before the selectmen. I said, you have a very prominent person buried here in Reading. They said, we do? He said, yes, you actually have a person who was U.S. chess champion back at the turn of the century, and they said, hey, we want this done. If Reading could be known as the resting place of Harry Nelson Pillsbury, we want that. So again, I want to thank you, Marty, and our viewers for watching this game that Harry Nelson Pillsbury played back in 1902, a blindfold game. Again, he was a phenomenon. Harry Nelson Pillsbury is a name that's known by tens of millions of chess players around the world. Wherever chess is played, you mention Pillsbury, people will know him. So I want you to join us next time, where Marty and I are going to present you an interesting game of a celebrity, a personality that actually fell in love with chess, as Harry Nelson Pillsbury did. And I hope you join us for the next edition of Chess Chat.